Good afternoon, folks. My name's Toad. You're watching Visordown, and welcome to Portimão for the launch of the new 2024 Honda CBR1000RR-R SP Fireblade. I've had an absolute ball today. It's been a double header of a launch. So this morning we were riding this new CBR1000RR. So if you want to check that out, there is another review over on the channel and a full editorial review of that bike on visordown.com. And then in the afternoon, we were riding the Big Daddy, the SP, here at the track. Never been here before, so I had the sessions on the CBR600 to kind of try and figure out my way around the circuit. And then this afternoon, we were out and about on the Fireblade, which is a bike I absolutely, truly adore. So what I'm going to do before I do the riding impressions, I'm just going to tell you what's new with it, and there is quite a lot to go over, so buckle up, folks. I'm going to start at the back here, which is rather random, but the exhaust system on the bike, if that end can looks bigger than the previous generation, that's because it is. So it's got a litre more volume in it, and that's to do with the Euro 5 Plus regulations that are about to come in effectively, just to try and keep it a little bit quieter without choking the engine too much. So that is now a litre bigger to make the bike a little bit more quiet. One big difference, and this is the first time you sit on the 2024 Fireblade, it's the first thing you notice, is that the rider triangle has changed massively. So it's much more accessible, it's much more comfortable than the previous gen, and it's just a much nicer place to be. I went on the launch of the 2020 Fireblade in Qatar, and that bike, the first time that I sat on the seat, I tried to pull my foot up onto the peg, and I couldn't get my foot up onto the peg. I was thinking, what's going on? Has it even got a peg? But it's because you have to lift your leg that high to get it on there. I just needed to find it. This is much nicer. So the pegs have been dropped by quite a sizable 16 millimeters, and they're not the only thing that has changed. So the bars are now 9 millimeters higher than they were on the previous generation bike, and they're 23 millimeters closer to the rider. They do feel as well, and these might have just been adjusted for this launch, I'm not 100% sure, but they don't feel quite as swept back as they did on the previous one, which makes controlling the bike on the brakes and getting the thing to turn when you're counter steering just a little bit easier as well. Also, the fuel tank sides have been sculpted a little bit more to help you hang off the bike. We've had a mixed bag of the weather, so we did get some dry sessions in, but yeah, it's there to help you hang off the bike when you're at full lean angle, when you're getting your knee down. We've got a lot gone on in the engine. So we've got new internals in the engine. We've got a lighter crankshaft, we've got lighter crankcases, we've got new conrods, we've got new intake valves, and we've got new valve springs, which are actually oval in shape to make them a little bit stronger and make them just last a little bit longer. We've also got a new intake and exhaust system. Really, the biggest thing that I felt riding the bike on the track today was a big difference in the mid-range power. So this bike in 2020 when I rode it, it was very, very peaky. So you had to really work the bike to get up into the rev range before it would make any power. And it kind of felt like a 600 in that way, that you'd have nothing, boom, you've got everything, and all of a sudden you're changing gear. This bike is much more tractable. It's still not an absolute torque monster like a Panigale. You can't roll out of a hairpin bend in second gear and just, you know, ask for a load of throttle and just shoot out of the corner. You have to plan it a little bit more, and you have to be a bit more conscientious with the way that you accelerate the bike, the way you brake the bike, and the way you turn the bike. But there is more mid-range grunt there, and that is a culmination of the engine changes that they've made and a change to the gearing. But a big part of it is the new split throttle body system, which I'm going to try and explain now, but it's quite complicated. So you've got two motor throttle bodies now, so there are four in total, obviously. You've got one motor that controls throttle body number 1 and number 2, and you've got a separate motor that controls 3 and 4, meaning that two throttle bodies at any one time can be open and the other two can be closed, and then they can all join in together. So what happens, you roll into a corner, you ask for a little bit of throttle, 1 and 2 will open, and you'll just get a nice gentle throttle as only cylinders 1 and 2 are firing. Then when you open the throttle further, you'll get the full bank of throttle bodies open, and the thing will just light up then and fire you out of the corner. It does another interesting thing though, and that's when you're engine braking into a corner, the throttle bodies 3 and 4 will open to allow air in, and the exhaust valve will remain closed. And it increases the engine braking effect, and it also makes a lovely gurgling noise from within the bike, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I'm going to talk about the split throttle bodies because they're a huge deal, and they're something that I think not just road riders would enjoy, but I think a lot of racing teams have been asking for this sort of thing, and that's kind of why Honda have brought it about. Javier Beltram, the Honda UK racing team manager, is really, really excited about what they're going to do on track. There isn't a huge sort of spike in the power when throttle bodies 2 and 3 open. It's not anything that would catch you out. It's really nicely metered, and what Honda have done is it just means that when you just trail on the throttle, you just get a nice gentle response from the engine, and then as you open the throttle further, you just get a more forceful response from the engine. It's nothing peaky. It doesn't all of a sudden shoot up in the rev range and feel like a turbo's kicked in and all of a sudden you're hanging onto the bike. It's very, very easy to control, and it's still a very, very tractable bike to ride. The off the throttle engine braking effect that I spoke about a moment ago, it does very much increase the amount of engine braking that the bike has got. You've still got the electronic engine braking through the ECU, so you can increase or reduce the amount of engine braking that you have anyway, but even just with it on the same setting, you can really feel that the bike is slowing up better. And what that really does for you is it gives you more stability as you're going into a corner. I've never been to Portimão before, and after riding it all day today, I'm still not 100% sure where it goes, and I'm not going to claim that I 100% know the circuit, but I was making my way around it earlier on in the dry. And one of the things that I enjoyed about the new split throttle body system was that when you were trailing into a corner that you weren't 100% sure where the apex was because it's over a blind crest, you don't want to be grabbing brake at that point, but if you just needed to roll off the throttle a minute just to gain a little bit of confidence, that extra engine braking would sort of just pull the bike down and hunker the bike down, and it would slow the bike in a much more controlled way than me either using the back brake or using the front brake, which is a very, very cool feature. I'm going to talk about the riding position because, like I said earlier, the old Blade was a bit of a beast to get on and off. The bars were low, the pegs were high, the seat was high. It was basically a riding position that was taken, carbon copied off the RCV213S, and it was put onto the road-going Fireblade sports bike. I still rode to the Isle of Wight to go and check out the diamond races on the previous generation Fireblade, but I can tell you that after a day of riding that thing, the next morning when I woke up, I was stiff as a board. I'm not going to say this is a bike that you are going to do any long distance touring on or anything like that. It's still a sports bike, it's still quite extreme, the seat's quite high, and compared to a lot of other bikes, the bars are quite low. But compared to the previous generation machine, it is an absolute beauty to ride because you've got that slightly more relaxed position on the bars and they don't feel quite as swept back as they did. And the foot peg position is just a joy. Kind of makes me wonder why Honda went with that really, really extreme foot peg position on the previous generation bike, because what they've done with this one is they've made the riding position better in every way for the rider and for everyday riders and road riders as well, but they've not taken anything away. So you haven't lost out on ground clearance. I wasn't scraping my toes, or I wasn't scraping the pegs as I was going around corners. So they've given you lots more and they've not taken anything away is probably the best way that I can sum it up. As I mentioned earlier on, the new engine internals, there's a lot that's gone on there, and they are what is boosting that mid-range power. The split throttle bodies really are increasing the rideability as you're coming out of a slow corner, and they're giving you the ability to pick up a trailing throttle a lot smoother than you could on the previous generation bike. The engine internals are what have made this latest generation feel so phenomenally fast, because we all got off it after the first session here, and bearing in mind we've been out in the morning on the CBR1000, but it basically pissed it down all morning. We got lucky, and both of our sessions this afternoon at the Portimão circuit were bright sunshine, a fully dry track and slick tyres. And every single person who came into the pits just said they couldn't believe how quick this thing feels. We're not talking about around the corners, we're not talking about as we're braking into corners or doing any of the stuff around the corners, because the chassis of the Honda Fireblade has never really wanted for anything. What it needed was the engine sorting and giving it that mid-range grunt. That's what they've done, and down the straight here at Portimão, it was an absolute missile, a proper rocket ship. And I think Honda needed to do that because they've lost ground, not just on the racetracks, but things like the Panigale V4S is an absolute monster in a straight line as well as in the bends. This has always been a monster in the bends. What they needed to do was bring it up to speed, and that 215 horsepower that it's got now is a much more usable thing for an everyday rider and a track day rider and a club racer. It's an absolute weapon. It is a £23,499 weapon though, and that's if you go for the SP. If you want the carbon edition, that is £26,744, which is quite a lot of money. But when you put it into context with the other 1000cc litre sports bikes and plus that are out there on the market, actually, it's basically in and amongst all of those other machines. Honda have 100% improved the Fireblade. I've ridden every generation of the latest bike, and the best thing that I can say is that of all the three that have been released since 2020, this one is such a huge step above the other two bikes. It makes me wonder how they've all managed to cram it in there and keep the thing the same price and get it through Euro 5+. Absolute corker of a day. Portimão, sort the weather out and you could be a beautiful place. Anyway, that is enough from me tonight, folks. I've been Toad, you're watching Visordown. If you've liked that video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of our latest videos. And for all the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to visordown.com. Thanks, folks.